people come in, we'll just go ahead and do a quick introduction. Welcome to our webinar, Women, Girls, and Digital Inclusion. We are very excited to be having a conversation about the importance of digital equity and digital inclusion, but specifically looking at economic opportunities and access for women and girls around the world. And we have an amazing conversation with some experts that are not only experts in the topic itself, but are also frontline practitioners in real time creating solutions that the world desperately needs to achieve gender parity and gender equity in the digital landscape. So we're going to go ahead and dive straight on in. The agenda for today's conversation is we're going to start off with giving you an overall understanding of the global landscape around digital and women's inclusion, specifically around the digital and economic equity. Then we're going to unpack a conversation around closing the gender digital divide. What does that actually mean? What resources, collaborations, and ideas does it take to actually help create progress on this topic? And then we're going to close out with a Q&A. So for anyone who's attending, you can use the chat box. There's a Q&A feature, and send us your messages, and we'll try to either address them in real time and weave them throughout the conversation, or we'll address them at the very end, either in writing or verbally. So really quick overview. My name is Hazami Barmada, and I'll introduce myself more formally in just a moment. But I'm the director of the Digital Equity Accelerator, which is a collaboration between the Aspen Institute and HP. We launched the Digital Equity Accelerator in 2002 with the goal of investing into nonprofit organizations that were really helping close the digital divide in their communities, but more importantly, looking at digital inclusion as a tool to achieve gender, social, and economic justice in their communities around the pillars of gender justice, including of marginalized communities. That means elderly populations, communities with disabilities, and other historically marginalized communities. So we are very proud to be in our second year, and some of the speakers today are actually grantees of our program, and you'll hear about them and their amazing work. So as I mentioned, my name is Hazami Barmada, and I am the director of the Digital Equity Accelerator on the Aspen Institute team. And I come to this work with a lot of background and experience in international development, but specifically in trying to inspire collaborations and more coordination around achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and big picture social and economic impact goals globally. I'm going to go through and introduce our esteemed panel, and then we're going to open it up for conversation. But my first speaker, really happy to be joined by Osama Manzar, who's joining us from India. And Osama is the founder and director of the Digital Empowerment Foundation, which is an organization that has a mission of eradicating information poverty in India and across the global south. They have to date empowered millions of users with a footprint of over 1,000 locations and 9,000 digital foot soldiers, as they call them, across 130 districts in 24 states. Welcome, Osama. We are also joined by Cana Ibañez. I added an R there and I shouldn't have. Ibañez, apologies, Cana. Cana is the co-founder of StartupLab Mexico, and it's a company dedicated to helping small businesses in Mexico navigate the complex world of digital transformation. She's also deeply committed to using social entrepreneurship as a means to impact underdeveloped communities. And we're really excited to have you with us, Cana. Welcome. We also have Jimena Bello González, who is the Deputy Director of Cana, which is also based in Mexico. And Jimena has been working to create a lot of solutions specifically for incarcerated women in prison populations. So she's the Operational Deputy Director of Cana, which is a social project that seeks to create job opportunities for women in prison through the implementation of programs and workshops that specifically aim to impact the personal development and economic independence, which is a very exciting project. Welcome, Jimena.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We have Thanae Bennani, who is the Executive Director of Douar Tech. And Cana is an experienced professional with a lot of diverse experience, specifically at the intersection of government affairs and public relations and international trade, bilateral cooperation, and also renewables and environment. And she is one of our grantees from Morocco from last year's cohort. So welcome, Cana.
Welcome, everyone.
Hello. And lastly, we have Gavin Weale. Gavin is the founder and CEO of Digify Africa, which is a social enterprise working across the African continent to help young people benefit from digital economy with skills, jobs, and work opportunities. And to date, they've trained over 750,000 young people on critical digital skills. They also, in 2019, launched a Digibot, which is one of the world's first automated WhatsApp chatbot courses, which has hundreds of thousands of active users in low-income backgrounds, teaching them basic digital skills. All right, go ahead and start by giving us a quick landscape, and then we're going to ask our panelists to help unpack the statistics and more information from their specific regions and countries. But globally, I just wanted to start by showing kind of a trend of global internet use around the world. So today, 2/3 of the world's population uses the internet. But that also means that 2.7 billion people remain offline. And of those that remain offline, we know that there is a disparity between access, both based on poverty and also gender. So you see here a map in 2022 of global internet use. And globally, there is disparity between access to the internet, but you'll notice that in lower income countries and middle income countries, that gap between digital access between women and men is actually substantially higher. And that brings us to digital equity. So digital equity, as we define it, which is how I want to frame our conversation today, is a reality in which all individuals and communities have access to the information technology skills to live a full and meaningful engagement in their societies and economies. We know that 90% of jobs in the future will have a digital component. So for those that are left offline, access to important things like employment, education, healthcare, and other essential services will become increasingly hard to have access to. Right now, it looks bleak. There is hope. We have hope because of all the amazing participants on our call today. But it will take 135.6 years to close the gender gap around the world today. And that number grew by 86 years during the span of COVID, so 12 months during COVID. We also know that in 2020, for instance, 32 countries around the world, including India, Egypt, and Nigeria, lost an estimated $126 billion in gross domestic products because women were unable to contribute to the digital economy. So as the title of our session and our webinar is today, the $1 trillion loss of economic opportunity in low and middle income countries because of exclusion of women from the digital world. We also know that in general, women have less access to not only the internet, as we just showed on the past screen, but also smartphones and access to other digital tools. And that results also in women being underrepresented in technology jobs, ICT jobs, management, and academic careers. So a lot of the STEM backgrounds and the STEM outputs. Don't know another word for that. But men are 4 times more likely than women to be involved in ICT. So we're going to unpack that with our panel. I'm going to start by let's look at the India context first. So Osama, I'm going to invite you to please share with us a little bit of the context specifically around women's economic inclusion in the region in which you work. And if you can give us a bit of a sense of what are some of the barriers for women's access to economic opportunity, education opportunity, and healthcare.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to see a large fraternity watching all of us trying to hear something very important, that women inclusion in digital arena. India's story is, as far as we are concerned, is slightly disappointing, but also very, very hopeful. Slightly disappointing from the perspective that India is a patriarchal country by nature and by practice, and that actually is the biggest hamper of policy making too, which can be inclusive of women of any kind. Don't forget about digital. Digital is the latest inclusion challenge that we all have. But in general, anything that we plan, we have this bottleneck of inclusion of women in any plan, whether we want to buy anything for the family or we buy anything for education and so on and so forth. So that's one big picture that that is there. And the second thing is inclusion of digital from the perspective, understanding that women can be more instrumental in lesser cost. And that is where I want to bring in our experience, being an awardee of Aspen and HP, is that we, for the last 20 years, most of our intervention has been in rural India, and where our anchors are women, the rural entrepreneurs are women, the women who actually drive digital. And our research shows that when you hand over a digital tool in the hands of a woman, the impact is, multiple X higher and the cost is much lower. For example, a woman of the house, if she becomes digitally literate, the entire house becomes digitally literate. If a woman of the house does business which include digital inclusion or a digital device, she is much more honest than a male part of the family, and therefore the money that she earns goes to home, building education, sending children to education. Third, the accountability of implementation of any project that you do, if your anchor is woman and the tool is digital, the accountability is very naturally very high among the women. They are very accountable, they are very responsible. You don't have to do extra cost of monitoring and evaluation to find out what is going on wrong or right, and so on and so forth. So from all, and there is a research that has been done going across thousands of our centers, which is run by women, digital centers, which serve people on the ground, who provide connectivity, who provide digital education, digital literacy. When the research was done, it found out that the women are much more productive, women are saving more money, women are taking money home rather than somewhere else, and they are producing at least 4 to 5 times more educational impact of digital inclusion than anybody else. And the latest addition is that when you are connected in the modern world, you are also started suffering from misinformation, fake news, hate speech, and so on and so forth. And almost no one can tell you what is the right information. There is a lack of understanding. And it has been found that if the woman is at the end of the user, then the forwarding doesn't take place as high as the men will forward the misinformation. She would cross-check the information whether it is right or wrong. She won't believe into the information immediately, but ask 10 times whether this information is right or wrong. So there are things that we are not talking across the world. You just mentioned that 327 million women are unconnected, which is like the equivalent to a country of US. If all unconnected women are kept in one place, you are like a country. And we are not only losing money, but we are also not saving money. We are spending extra money by indulging, giving digital tools in the hands of men without giving preference to women. So you are actually suffering more. Not only it's a business opportunity, but it's also a lost opportunity. You are losing more money. You are investing per person, per man, more money to make them digitally inclusive than a woman would do. So a woman having a mobile phone in her hands is more effective in just about $200 than anybody else. She is an educator. She is a domestic responsible person. She is a micro entrepreneur, and she is also a disseminator of right information. And that's what I'm learning. I'm coming from in India, and I'm not taking this example and anecdote of this example from one or two. I'm talking about we have 2,000 digital centers across the country in 140 or 50 districts. And this experience is coming from the ground in multilingual geographies, in multidimensional geographies, and in the deep rural areas. And that's what I wanted to share with this platform, that take digital, take women, have not 1 trillion loss, multiply but several trillion embedded more with less investment. That's what our learning says at the moment. Thank you very much.
I wanted to share just a quick statistic from a 2020 National Family Health Survey in India that only 42% of Indian women surveyed had ever used the internet in comparison with 62% of men. But on a positive note, the mobile internet gender gap did narrow from 68% to 50% in 2017 due to more affordability of access to not only smartphones, but also the internet. Gavin, I'm going to go over to you in the South Africa, and maybe you guys work also across the African continent. So can you please answer the question from your perspective? What are barriers of access for digital equity, specifically for women?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, there's the issue of data. I think this is obviously a problem for access generally across the continent, and particularly particularly extreme in South Africa, because the cost of data relative to wages and the cost of living in South Africa is particularly steep. So given the fact that women are less likely to access the internet anyway, and that one startling statistic about South Africa in particular is 97% of domestic workers are women. So low-income jobs are, largely done by women. So therefore, there's huge barriers just getting on the internet, just accessing basic internet, which plays itself out into other kind of dynamics, like being able to access basic financial services, digital financial services. So obviously women are much lower in the percentages there. And then we work a lot in terms of access to employment initiatives. And I think the trends, clearly mirror the ones that you talked about at the beginning of this session. But another kind of startling statistic there was that only 2.9% out of 22% female graduates in the ICT sector are employed in the sector, and there's a very, very low rate of women being in senior management positions as well. So there is that. I mean, there is that obviously income and work inequality entrenched in the company already, but it's more extreme in the ICT sector as well, and in terms of earnings. For example, the government does talk a really good game in South Africa about this, and the goals that we have, and I think there has been a serious effort from the public and private sector here to particularly address the access gap. There's a push by 2024 to try and get up to 80% of the population having internet access. It's currently hovering just above 55%. But the big themes for us in our work are really about digital literacy and making that accessible, with women and girls in mind particularly, but also entry into the labor market in the ICT sector and the ability to build sustainable and successful careers.
And I'm going to go over to you for the Mexico context. What are some of the barriers for women's economic inclusion in Mexico? And maybe also if you can give us an overall understanding of the situation for women's economic empowerment and economic inclusion.
Yes, thank you. Well, from here in Mexico, like 70% of the territory has internet, like wide internet. The thing here is that the lowest or the farthest communities far from the urban or the city are the ones that doesn't have and are the ones that are poor. So here in Mexico, the women are the ones that are staying home and the ones that are like households, and men are the ones that will go to work like in the factories or in the fields, and the women are the ones that are staying home and the ones that have the education of the children here. But what we do in StartupLab is that we are helping them, these women that are leading businesses like making the food or having some products to sell. So we are helping them to assure that they have a digital transformation education in how to become better businesses, like in the helping them to sell through the internet with digital tools.
We could hear you, Anna, if you want to continue.
And here in Mexico, like, it's a very varied population. Like, we have one of the richest men in the world, but also we have a very poor people that doesn't have a digital phone or connection or even light. So it's a big screen of the population here. So someone are very rich, but someone are very, very poor that doesn't have access to all these tools or the internet, and it's very difficult to reach them.
And Jimena, I'm going to come over to you because you also work, Anna's talking about marginalized communities. You are working in the same country, in Mexico, with even more marginalized populations, the women's prison population, which oftentimes most people don't even think about when it comes to programming, specifically for digital inclusion programming. Can you speak to the demographic of people that you serve and women's economic exclusion from the vantage point of the communities that you're also working with?
Thanks, Hazami. Yeah, well, first of all, I think, as Anna said, we have a lot of disparities in Mexico, and I think that's one of the big problems that we have. Also, as you said, in La Cana, we work with women in prison in Mexico City and the state of Mexico, which is one of the biggest states in the country. And of course, we really don't think about that kind of population. I think it's sometimes it's easiest just to think about children or poor people, etc., because it's something that we can see. But when we talk about women in prison, it's just only that we don't see them. It's not something that is over there. It's not important. And in Mexico, we have a lot of cultural issues with that. So as you can imagine, when you're in prison, you don't have access to anything. First of all, because you don't have rights. You just have your human rights, but not like citizen rights. So I think that's very important because they can't have access to anything. And the other thing is that 80% of the women that are imprisoned comes for a very pure environment. So even outside, when they were in liberty, they don't have access to most of the things that usually you should have because you live in Mexico or because other people in Mexico have. And of course, we have like a amazing gender wage gap and a different workforce participation if we think about women and men. So I think all this is crucial to promoting gender equality and how we empower women in all aspects of their lives. And this is it doesn't matter if you're in jail or in liberties. I think in Mexico we still have a lot of things to work on. And the other thing that I was thinking about what Osama says is that women in Mexico work a lot. A lot of women in Mexico work more than men, and we have more savings, and we understand that we have to take care of our families, but still we have less participation. For example, when we talk about financial services, more than 35% of the population in women don't have a credit card, just because they are women, just because they don't have any idea on how to get to the bank and have one, and it's free and you can have it, but they prefer to have their savings in their own house. And sometimes when they have like a husband or a partner, the husband or the partner is the one that take care of the money, just take the money of the women and do like normal things. So I think we also have to work on that. And for example, it's estimated that approximately half of small and medium-sized enterprises in Latam and in Mexico are owned by women. And despite of this, the World Bank reports that around 70% of financing requests made by women entrepreneurs in developing countries like Mexico are rejected just because they are women, and maybe they don't have the same experience as men in business, but we understand that they are good, and that's something that's important in Mexico's economic right now. And I think in addition, there is a gender digital divide in Mexico, which is very huge, which is important, and we have to address that because women have less access to digital technologies and are less skilled using them, because when we are in the school, it's not common in Mexico when you're in a public school that you have amazing computer labs or you have a phone or you have a laptop, etc. So you start growing with lack of that digital skills. So when you're older and you have to take care of your family, or you have to take care of something, or you want to have a new business, you have like these limitations. So for example, in Mexico, around 50% of women, less than 50% less likely to own a cell phone, according to men. So, for example, the disparity in cell phone ownership factors into less access to digital financial services. A phone is critical for opening bank accounts and to see how your money is growing, etc. And you can use you can have a better use of financial tools, such as money transfers, applying for credits, online payments, etc., etc. So if you don't have a phone, you don't even think about that. So I think addressing the challenges and promoting women's economic inclusion in Mexico requires coordinated action by the government, the private sector, and society, of course. And we need to think about that, because I'm always thinking, imagine if Mexico's economy will if we double down our efforts, if all women that have like this small businesses have a bank account and have more participation in the Mexico's economic, maybe we can have a different country.
Hi, everybody. I've also lost internet access, and I'm dialing in on my mobile phone without access to my computer screen. So sincere apologies for that. Jimena, you talk about something really important, which is also the kind of the responsibility of multiple sectors, including the government, in providing these services. You all represent nonprofit organizations that are oftentimes the service providers, but we do know that true and sustainable solutions for digital inequity do live across multiple sectors. We do require government solutions. We require policy change. We also require more funding and more financing and more innovative financing and investing into more innovative technology. Cana, I think we have you back. So if we can go over to you to discuss the Morocco context, but also if you can unpack a little bit more about the partnerships as you address your response, please.
Yes. Thank you, Hazami. So I was saying that the Morocco women active participation in the economy has gone backwards since 2000. We were at a bit above 22%, and now we are merely to 16%, and that is in spite of the increase in indicators of access to education, to healthcare, to mobility, and all those numbers that we seem to think that there are there are obstacles for access to employment. So when we started thinking about how to tackle economic empowerment, and we dug into the numbers and the economic factors about the availability of jobs, of industries, we noticed that there was this disparity first between the rural and the urban areas. Instead of talking about rural and urban, I prefer to talk about disadvantaged territories, because sometimes the peri-urban areas are just an extension of the rural areas, and also some small towns, even though they are identified as small cities, they have a very dominant rural nature. And so when we dug into those the populations of women in those areas, the most of the programs that have catered to supporting economic activity of women in rural areas, they considered that the whole rural female rural population was illiterate, was disconnected. But when we went to the field and we met with potential beneficiaries or participants, we realized that there was a group of women who were young, they were educated, and they were also digitally connected, and they happened to live in the rural areas either by choice. After they finished their school, they went back, or by some family circumstances, because they're caring for older parents, they have a sick brother, or so they are active, they're just not compensated, and they need something to do because they can't go to a regular, a conventional job, and there are no industries or employers around them. So we thought about entrepreneurship, and we thought, if we can bring and support training for entrepreneurship to these populations of young, educated, and connected women, then we, how could we use the digital tools to improve access to training and support to entrepreneurship, but also because of the limitations of the market in those communities, there would be no feasible entrepreneurship for them if they don't have access to the online markets. So, and that's why we put the digital immersion workshop and training, which consists of digital marketing tools and also web development, very basic, no code, just WordPress, for those entrepreneurs to be able to be on the net and be able to market their products on the net, and that way giving them the full potential of expanding their business beyond the geographic and the logistical limitations of their communities. And we went a step forward into this process, into a community engagement process, and we thought, if we want these women to be able to exchange in a digital world, we need also to include their communities in the digital space. And so we designed an engagement or a leadership action within their programs, by which each participant would have to give 2 workshops in her community, one about raising awareness about entrepreneurship opportunities. So she would inspire other people in her community to, if they have a project idea, to go ahead and launch, and why they should do that instead of waiting for employment. And 2, to conduct digital literacy workshops for people who are excluded of the digital space. And we've been successful in doing so, and we've had 40-fold community beneficiaries that has benefited either from awareness to entrepreneurship or digital literacy. And this is all done thanks to the digital, the hybrid tool that we use to train. So our programs, they span over 6 months, and they go, one part goes virtually, it's online, and one part is done in person to reinforce the peer-to-peer learning and exchange. I want to go back to one thing that you had, that Hazami, you had mentioned at the beginning of this session. usually the information that is shared about the connectivity or the access to internet is partially biased. And I'm going to explain why. When we say that 75% of the population has access to internet, what it means is that it has a smartphone and it has access to the 3G or 4G universal coverage. But we all know that if you are in this training space, if you're in the education space, if you are into pedagogy tool development, you cannot access, you cannot achieve, or you cannot target, you cannot get to your population online if you don't have a quality broadband connection. And that is something that has actually been excluding us as trainers to go and implement our programs closer to the populations, to the most excluded population. So we always have to go to the nearest urban town that has a broadband connection if we want to implement our in-person workshops, for example, for the digital immersion workshop to do web development for those women. So we need, in addition to raise awareness about what is digital equity, we also need to correct some of the biased information and the biased knowledge that seems to spread the idea that we're very advanced, that everything is okay and everything is accessible and everybody can be on the net if they choose.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Cana. We're a case in point example. We're both in major cities globally, and both of our internet connectivity keeps dropping. I think you absolutely are correct, and you're talking about the pillars of digital equity. There's access to the tools themselves, like access to a mobile phone. Then there's affordability of the internet, but then there's simply access to infrastructure itself, and that is also a barrier. But even for people that have those three components, knowledge of how to then navigate the internet or content that's relevant to them or understandable to them is also a barrier. So there are 4 pillars and barriers of access. Osama, I'm going to come back to you as we're thinking about solutions. A lot of the work that your organization does is not only talking to and training people on digital literacy, but you're also employing these women to then be not only service providers. So you're addressing a problem, but then also providing an employment opportunity for the women to be then frontline responders. Can you explain a bit about the importance of kind of maybe partnerships and the role of ecosystem approaches to addressing digital equity? Because you are addressing them in multiple fronts. You're addressing employment, you're addressing also lack of training and education, you're also addressing lack of infrastructure simultaneously. So can you speak to the multi-pronged approach there?
Well, thank you very much. Actually, when you go to rural parts of the country, anywhere I would say, but mostly in India, you will first face a male who will come in forward to you and try to offer solution or responsibility and so on and so forth. But when you go and look at the parameters, that who is illiterate, who has not reached, who is not talking, who is suffering, who doesn't know about the government entitlements or the scheme or anything, you will always find it is women. So, this has been for decades, in most of the country, but certainly in this part of the world for sure. So what we decided is that let's first choose the smartest and the most forward-looking and slightly, proactive woman in that area, right? By inquiring that who is slightly smart, who has been regularly been going to school and has reached something, who has already crossed the limitations and came forward and doing something. And then we identify such women and hand over lots of equipments and training and capacity building and tell her that, listen, you have so many people unconnected. You have a larger population of girls and women who do not know about how to access education, or how to access banking information, or how to access health information, or how to access entitlement, simple entitlement, like rations, like job openings, and so on and so forth. And then suddenly what happens is that if it is a woman who is in front, which has got equipment, who is trained in connectivity and access and digital literacy, what happens is that most of the girls start coming to that person, right? It's very natural, if the woman is having the setup or the infrastructure, it's the other woman who will come first. So that itself actually drives an ecosystem in such a way that this shop or this place or this community space and this person is actually a person who is welcoming the person who otherwise feel hesitant to go. If this is a male part, then there is a lot of hesitancy. Many people will not say because of the safety reason. Many people won't say because of the system of what you call as that male-female distance from each other, right? It is also because you follow certain kind of parda system or the veil system or something like that, right? In most of the culture in India at a grassroots level, people, women put veil in front of the face, even with the elder relatives. So there are so many barriers, right? And these are cultural barriers, traditional barriers. So when a woman is sitting at the place where she is saying, I have 4 computers, I have connectivity, it automatically attracts other women who are suffering from access, who are not having access, trying to find out something. And that is actually giving a multiplier impact, right? Just because you are choosing a woman, you have a larger footfall, you have a larger number of girls coming to you, you are reaching more women by means of providing those government entitlements which is meant for them. It's very simple, Government says, I will give you free education. Government says, I will give you free food. The government says, I will give you free hand. Government says X, Y, Z. But all of this, first of all, women do not know about it. Second, if they know, it is the male who is providing at the other end, and she is hesitant to go to the male part. So, without really fighting patriarchy, just because you chose woman as your anchor with a digital tool, which is actually a connection to all the services from education to finance to everything, you are enabling a larger number of beneficiary in your system, whether it's access to education or something. Lastly, I would like to end it by saying is that education is the first most attraction point for young girls, right? For that, the only place where they go is a school. And after they reach puberty, most of them stop going because of various reasons, because of not nice toilet, not working toilet, not having, full of attendance of education system and so on and so forth, or the school far away. But this kind of, digitally equipped community center run by women actually gives you access to a lot of education without really going to school. Or even if you are going and not getting a quality education, here you can get a quality education. And lastly is that nano entrepreneurs who may not be earning $100 a month, right? $100 is a lot of money here. Maybe $30 or $50. They may have a lot of product that they want to reach out to the larger number of people. They need connectivity. They need a little training how to use WhatsApp or how to use commerce on WhatsApp, or for that matter on social media. This is actually helping the woman sitting there becomes a non-cultural barrier to the world that is hidden behind those devices, which otherwise was hiding behind patriarchy, right? Which is not there now if a woman is sitting with those devices and automatically attracting those points. And once you put a little success, the whole village start appreciating it. Oh, see, my wife is earning. My wife is giving so many social services. My wife is actually attracting so many people coming to her, and everybody is asking. And this is a new trend that we have been able to create, and I will be very happy to provide lots of study material about how these women are smiling, having a mobile. If I quote unquote, some of the girls and women say that I can leave my house, I can leave my husband, but I cannot give the mobile that I have snatched away from my husband, which is giving me so many business, or is giving me so much of liberty, which is giving me so much of contact among other fraternity around the villages. So these are very, very exciting time that mobile is actually becoming a multifaceted tool of empowerment, liberty, freedom of expression, and doing business.
That's really great. And I want to pivot over to you, Gavin, because we keep talking about innovation, and what we just heard from Osama and Cana and Anna and everybody, Jimena, is that sometimes it's not necessarily innovation, it's simple solutions, and we can innovate our process. So it's not creating something new and flashy, you know, this idea that innovation is such a buzzword, but it's rather creating tools that work. And sometimes it's meeting communities where they're at. You guys created a chatbot as a mechanism, a tool, I mean, on WhatsApp, right? A lot of people use WhatsApp. So you created an innovation on a platform where people already are engaged. Can you tell us a bit more about what fueled your use of a chatbot, and a little bit more about kind of the impact that you're able to make by meeting communities where they're at?
Yeah, so for many years, our sort of higher scale digital literacy programs were delivered by young trainers on the ground across South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, going into communities. And that was quite a powerful way of delivering training, but we felt like we wanted a digital delivery mechanism that was appropriate for the type of, in our case, young people we're trying to reach, who don't have access to good devices and don't have much money for data. And so really it was driven by our own need to try and make our content more accessible. A lot of the other e-learning solutions we looked at just did not seem appropriate. And many of them, of course, are designed with Western audiences in mind. So we started using WhatsApp as a sort of learner support tool. But eventually in 2019, pre-COVID, we decided to try and build our own programs and courses that meant that users didn't have to leave WhatsApp to consume the content. So we've built automated chatbot courses, and over the last 3 years, we've developed it into actually what is now a full kind of learning management system that works within the WhatsApp environment. And it's been really successful in terms of kind of getting people on board. Over 600,000 subscribers have been on the platform in the last 18 months. And of those, 62% have completed the content that's on there, which is basic digital literacy courses. So it's proving a great way to engage people in that kind of entry-level content, which is about how you can use your phone to access government services or financial services or to search for a job. But the best stat really is the fact that people are completing this program and the content and wanting more. So next for us is to try and deepen the levels of engagement we can offer within WhatsApp and try and push that to its limit. And of course, it's really the lowest barrier of entry, because you don't have to download an app. It's very low data usage, and many people know how to use the application already.
And I'm going to come over to you on designing solutions with women. You are through StartupLab in Mexico, working specifically to empower women to be entrepreneurs, so women to create businesses and to create solutions in their communities. Can you unpack why it's so important to design solutions with and for women, but specifically with women, and how that then impacts their communities?
Yes, we help them and teach them how to use WhatsApp as for their business, and we make for them a landing page or a website so they can sell online. And we also help them to develop their social media, because everybody has social media like Facebook or Instagram, but like for personal things or for family things, but they don't know how to use it for their businesses. So we teach them how to use them and how to improve their sales using social media and digital marketing, so they can improve their businesses. And with that, they start to sell more, so they improve their incomes. and their community and their families become better because they are more integrated, they have more opportunities with that money to improve their education, to have a better way of life. And with the example that we are having with those women, other women want to participate in our programs so they can be helped with those tools, and they can improve their business or start a business and improve their way of living. And I think it's that very important for the community, because like having a better way of life decreases the violence that they live in their communities.
Which is extremely important. I mean, you're talking about also the intersectionality of issues. We know that poverty, lack of access to educational opportunities also results in lack of access to healthcare services, also increased domestic violence in some cases. So this is a very important point that you brought up. Jimena, I'm going to come to you to look at the challenges beyond infrastructure. We talked about lack of access to the internet itself and lack of affordability, but one of the audience questions was asking about the biggest challenges that you've experienced in trying to improve digitization efforts in your communities, and how have you actually addressed them?
Yeah, I think when we talk about women in prison, the biggest challenge is for women to truly believe that they deserve the same opportunities, even if they are in prison, that they deserve to have interesting workshops, that they deserve to learn new things inside prison, because if not, we can't talk about social reintegration after that. And also, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is to with the discipline to go to class, because a lot of women really don't have that discipline. And that's because there's a lot of women that don't, for example, don't go to school, or it's the first time that are doing something like this. So they don't, maybe they don't think it's important, or they can't understand that they have to go every week to the workshop. And also the challenge with the Mexican authorities to give us dignified spaces for the workshops inside the prison, because they think that this is not important and this is a waste of time. So we need to work with them to share why this is important. And I think it's very important, because if we give these women and this population the tools to understand how to use the computer to like close the digital gap, they can have better jobs when they are when they have their freedom. So they can stay away from crime and gives them a real second chance. And if we talk about less crimes in Mexico, we talk about a better city and a better country for everyone. And I think there is where we have to focus the conversation around this.
And Cana, I'm going to come to you because the internet was not fair to you today, so you're going to help close us out here. There's a question around helping women in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq who are suffering with government, or struggling rather with government policies. And I'm going to build on that and ask you to also expand on what momentum do we need to build, and what do we need to change in order to actually help achieve digital inclusion for women globally?
I think that there needs to be awareness that there's a crucial space for collaborative action between all the stakeholders in terms of designing strategies that are inclusive, and also co-designing those strategies with the target populations. And I stress on the target populations because there are several groups of women. If we try to make a program for women in general, it's only going to benefit a small group, and it's going to create frustration within all the other women that don't identify themselves as part of the profile or the persona that has been defined for this program. So that's why we need to customize. We need to bring solutions, strategies that are created and co-created with the population that comes from their needs and that really fits the expectations that they have into changing their everyday life. So there needs to be more participative approach in those collaborative actions where everybody can bring either policy reform or equipment or market opening. For example, there are a lot of underdeveloped countries where the market for infrastructure is not liberalized, which makes the access very difficult, which makes it unaffordable. So there needs to be all these stakeholders come together and talk about the different obstacles of digital inclusion in the presence of the disfavored populations that are being excluded. And thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. We could definitely continue this conversation for a very long time. Please do look up all of our speakers. Do follow their amazing work and them also on LinkedIn, on social media. This type of work is only possible with a community support. It's going to take all sectors and all people to really come together and create sustainable solutions, not only for women, but for most marginalized communities globally. We do have our upcoming event series on the 26th of July, and we invite you all to join. That will focus specifically on the educational digital divide and specifically on solutions for the nexus of digital equity and education. We thank you all again for joining us. Please do stay in touch with us. Thank you for your time, and we will be distributing this video afterwards. And a huge thank you to our speakers, not only for joining us today and for sharing all your wisdom, but for all the work that you're doing every single day in your communities and the advocacy that you're doing to uplift women and girls around the world. So thank you very much. And with that, we bid you adieu.